Good afternoon. Welcome to the Winter Show. We're delighted to have you here this year's edition of America's leading art, antiques, and design show. As many of you know, the Winter Show is not just a celebration of exceptional art and craftsmanship, it's also a benefit for Eastside House Settlement. Founded in 1891, Eastside House is a service organization based in the South Bronx that provides life-changing programs to support education, workforce development, and community well-being. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce today's panel discussion, Past as Prologue, Collecting Americana for Tomorrow. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to our esteemed panelists, today's moderator, Tony Freund, and our panelists, Jennifer Carlquist, William Cullum, Elizabeth Pyne Singer, and Elizabeth Feld. So Tony, over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Helen. Thank you all for showing up on a Tuesday afternoon. Who would have thunk it? I'm really thrilled to be asked to come back and moderate yet another panel with this wonderful group of people here. The Winter Show is a highlight on the calendar of any art and design lover. It's long an anchor of New York's Americana Week. The show has evolved over the years in keeping with changing collecting tastes and habits. We gather today against a background chorus of proclamations that brown furniture is dead. Then there's the ambivalence that even our host, The Winter Show, has about the word antiques. And finally, much like Trump with the Democrats, contemporary art and design continue to dominate the conversation with their look at me flash and outrageousness. Despite this backdrop, there are signs that the pendulum can swing, and in fact is already swinging toward an appreciation for antique and vintage pieces, not just American-made, but brown furniture of all origins. We see it on First Dibs, and you can see it within the drill hall today. And the panelists here are the perfect quartet to talk about the pendulum swing and the ways in which the past does serve as prologue to a beautiful future. So they are Elizabeth Feld, Managing Director of Hirschl and Adler Gallery, a longtime Winter Show exhibitor and a member of the First Dibs family, and an old friend. The interior designer William Cullum of Jayne Design Studio, working in tandem with the eminent Thomas Jayne. Jennifer Carlquist, Executive Director of Boscobel, a remarkable early 19th century house and gardens overlooking the Hudson River in Garrison, New York. And finally, the interior designer Elizabeth Pyne Singer, the third generation in her family to work at McMillan, the oldest interior design firm in America. So great cast of characters and actually great, wonderful people too. To start things off, so you're each working at institutions with a strong identity and legacy that stretches back years and even generations. So I want to ask each of you how you respect and honor that institutional history while helping to forge a path forward. And Liz, since you're next to me, you start.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for being here today to celebrate art and design with us and the Scarlet Letter Antiques. A for antiques. I always call it the Scarlet Letter, but I wear it proudly. Hirschl and Adler has been offering works of art from 18th century to the present for a very, very, very long time. We are 73 years old. And at this fair, we primarily show 19th, sometimes 18th, but 19th and early 20th century material. I think it's very important to tip our hats to the past. We have very much a house style. People tend to say that we don't look the same every year because the objects change radically, but we are proud of our look, our house style, our look, and that is the nod to our history, to the way we have looked. This is our 50th year at the show, and not for all of those 50, but for most of those 50, we have been very proud about our house style. So you recognize us when you come down the aisle and find us in the same location as we've been for many, many years. So how do we stay relevant? Well, we infuse the booth with some more modern and contemporary here and there to appeal to a broad audience. And we show people how they can use works of different tastes, of different periods, of different styles all together. And I think that's where relevance comes in, is learning how to use works together in new ways as time passes and as style changes.
Yeah, I think traditionally the show, there was a lot of homogeneity here, and I think it's enriched by the variety that's brought in, both in the variety of galleries that are represented here and also in the actual curation of each booth. Okay, so Thomas. Thomas is a legend. You, William, are the cool, younger element of that. Talk about coming to Thomas Jayne and how you work with this incredible heritage, but also have really done great things, with Thomas to update the look.
Well, I came to New York 13 or 14 years ago to work with Thomas, and have been there since and gotten to work on a lot of amazing projects kind of across the spectrum. And sort of in contrast to the house style that Liz was talking about, it's really fun getting to work with a variety of clients, and collections are always different. And regardless, everybody has an antique of some nature, and it can be antique by definition, it can be antique to them. But that's what our job is. It's to assemble a collection, whether it's an intentional collection or just happens to be the family's sort of accumulation of objects over years. So, and it's always fun getting to move these things into a new context, which is generally what we are doing. It's rare for us, at least, to be redecorating an existing house. It's typically people moving into a new apartment, a new home, building a new house. So it's getting to shop for exciting fabrics, used with antiques, using antiques for contrast, using antiques as part of a collection. So it's kind of across the gamut, and that's what's really fun about it for me.
Okay, Jennifer, tell us about Boscobel.
Yes. Well, Boscobel House and Gardens. May I just ask how many people have visited Boscobel on the Hudson? Oh, I'm so glad to see that. Well, most of you know it then as one of America's most beautiful places. It really is unusual in that it is a design museum first. So our goal is to have, a beautiful place for people to come and learn and gather, and then be historically accurate, yes, but secondarily. So it's not necessarily embalmed as a time capsule. It has always evolved. And right now we've been forced into some evolution, and some of these are the images we brought in. We've been dabbling for the past 10 years or so to do interventions, contemporary art alongside our period furnishings. Our golden era is New York neoclassical furniture, 1800 to 1820, but introducing contemporary makers that comment on those beautiful styles that are already drawing inspiration from antiquity. We bought these fabulous lamps from Hirschl and Adler last year at the fair. We're also embracing things like these stoneware objects that were broken and mended beautifully and repaired and kept into service for 200 years. So taking a look at Boscobel and maybe thinking about it in a way that it's not so pristine. And we're not very pristine at the moment because gravity has helped along our evolution. It's really sped it up. We had a ceiling collapse in April, and so all of our beautiful interiors need to be urgently rethought. And at the moment, we are in the process of removing all of the ceilings of the house, and we're going to be putting the house back together over the next really several years. So what's the new Boscobel going to look like? What is Boscobel 3.0? And we're at a crossroads in so many different ways for museums, telling stories we never told before, looking at rooms like this and thinking, how did the servants move through this space? What about the craftspeople who made these objects, whose stories we haven't uncovered yet or haven't heard from? What about, more than just what's on the surface of these rooms, and really finding new layers and new perspectives on them. So it's an exciting time at Boscobel. It's daunting because these are some of America's most beautiful rooms, but change is here, and every room is a period room, whether we admit it or not, and every room is evolving, whether we admit it or not. So to be really intentional about that, it's a great privilege and it's a big responsibility. And I'm so glad to have advisors like this along the way.
I'm sorry for your ceiling, but it's also sort of a wonderful metaphor. It could be a collapsed ceiling, or it could be opening up to new possibilities.
That's right.
A new reinvented or rethought Boscobel.
Yes, we're always looking up now.
Okay, Elizabeth McMillan, you come to that in an interesting way.
So my name is Elizabeth Pyne Singer, and I grew up in New York City, and I work at McMillan, which was founded in New York City in 1924. So we just turned 100. And I think that it's very easy for us to stay relevant because we live in New York, and we keep our eyes open all the time. And we go to Europe and look for new dealers. And I think that our new inspiration comes from the same place it came when McMillan was founded in 1924. It's tradespeople, it's dealers, art dealers, furniture dealers. And I think if you keep your eyes open and are flexible, was one of the things I learned from my grandmother, who worked at McMillan started in 1952. You will remain relevant, and you'll be at the forefront of design. And I think there's no other place to be, really. I think you could be in Paris or New York, but there's no other place in the world otherwise. I really don't think there is. So again, just McMillan founded in 1924 by Eleanor McMillan Brown. And from the beginning, she started a partnership with William Odom, who taught at the New York School of Fine and Applied Arts, which is now Parsons. And they started dealing he would go to Paris, send her furniture to sell, and then she would sell them to all of her rich friends. And we were the first interior designers to have an architecture department, a business office, and then the decorating. Yeah, and our book, 100 Years of Interior Design, is coming out in October. So, and as Jennifer pointed out, I at first thought, if there's someone who's not equipped to talk about Americana, it's probably me. But then Jennifer mentioned, our firm sort of stands for Interior Design in America. And it really does. And it's funny because to know if what I'm doing is right architecturally, if I'm doing the proper thing for a client's house, I look in our archives and I see, what did Mrs. Brown do in 1930 when the ceiling came up and then sloped? Did she put wallpaper on the slope too and then had the crown? And that's what I do. And I was so excited to see in an archive photo from 1927 or something that she did the same thing. And so then I can do it and know that it's correct, because I did grow up, since the first thing I can remember, if Mrs. Brown said it was right. Like, that's it. And so it's very helpful to me. Or today my friend was saying, oh, should I send someone anemones for their birthday? And I said, yes, anemones are actually the McMillan flower. And let me send you this photograph from 1934 for the San Francisco show. And there was, anemones everywhere in the room. And there was also Modigliani. So it was just like, it's very inspiring.
Well, I think, what's remarkable is you four are all associated with these really venerable institutions, but to a certain degree, the culture celebrates the new and the flashy. And I feel, sort of tragically, you've been sort of put in the position of apologizing for, we're McMillan, but we're not that McMillan. But actually, I think you four embrace kind of your legacy and build on it. And I think that's sort of the gist of this conversation, is not turning your back on history, but actually building upon it. It's not a static thing. Again, any more thoughts on sort of how you've come to terms with the legacy and fully embraced it? Have you ever have to sort of say, apologize for it, and now have you changed your mind on that?
If I could take a stab maybe at this, only because museums are so often charged with staying the same, right? With preserving, with encasing something. And yet Boscobel is a little bit outside of that tradition. Boscobel was always curated in part with academics, yes, but also decorators and designers were always involved in Boscobel's interiors. All of our textiles were provided by Brunswick and Fee and Scalamandre in the 1970s, and so it's a different model. But what I will say is everyone, and so many institutions are really at a crossroads and wrestling, and I feel like there's a push to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and that is happening again and again. So many period rooms are being removed or gallerized or denuded of their meaning and their strength and their value and their power. And we're doubling down because that domestic interior is still compelling and so malleable and can do anything you ask it to do if you do it thoughtfully and if you respect what it is. And I feel like all of us understand our strengths and we embrace those strengths, and we understand our weaknesses too, but to lean into the strengths, it can do, Americana, American Antiques, they can do so much more than we've challenged them to do in the past. And they're not disappearing, they're not going away. The market is definitely changing, but that just means there's more room for everybody, and that the ladder is broadening, and that everyone can buy something incredible that you could never have had for generations before. And I think it's an exciting time.
I think also I don't find that I have to apologize for being 100 years in business, but I feel like I have to clarify a lot of times, because somehow, I don't know how, because we actually didn't do it for very long, but the chintz period, I think people think of McMillan in the 80s, and we've been around since 1924. We've actually always been extremely contemporary. And, I have to remind people, well, in 1942, we had an exhibition where Jackson Pollock and Lee Krasner met for the first time. I mean, that was groundbreaking. In 1952, my grandmother, her job was to hand out pamphlets for the show called Paris 52. It was the first time that Jacques Adnet and Knoll and all these French designers exhibited in America. It was at McMillan. So we've always been very avant-garde. And our show house, we did the Kips Bay Show House, and it was titled Old Guard Avant-Garde. So it's very extremely annoying when people say, oh, you're traditional, and we're not. And the chintz lasted 5 years. It was when my grandmother was like rolling in clients. It was probably one of our most successful periods. And so there's a lot of chintz still around, that is attributed to us, which is great, but it's not us, and it never really was. So
I do feel it. It's like when you're at you come to the salon or something like that and you talk about what you do, I always feel kind of like you're apologizing for being a traditionalist because it's not cool to be that way. And I think it's hard because it's not necessarily a replicable thing. Like you're scrolling through Instagram and you see like a curvy boucle Vladimir Kagan sofa. Anybody can go out and buy that. Anybody can buy that. But you see some wonderful classical card table. You can't just replicate it. It's not, it doesn't exist en masse like that. So it's really complicated. I think among a certain group of people, it's still really popular, and I can see it coming back. There's a number of really great dealers and cool new art shows, like the Nameless Art Show that's happening in Chelsea. That's more sort of outsider art. And you guys know you are at the Outsider Art Fair.
We have done it.
I think it's just kind of manifesting in new ways, which is what's exciting about it.
The one thing I always tell people is you can't apologize for quality and rarity. You can't. I mean, things that are really hard to find, so what if they're not the hottest thing that everybody wants to buy right now? Pendulum swings, things come back, life is cyclic. I mean, if something is rare and beautifully made, I'll stick with it. And we stick with it. And yes, we broaden our interests to be relevant and to serve a clientele that is broader in terms of aesthetics and in terms of perhaps age and financial ability. Of course, we're a business after all, but you can't apologize for quality. And if that quality is more traditional, so be it. I'm sticking with it. I don't want, we're very deliberate. Yes, we're very broad in our offerings, but we're also very deliberate about what we will and won't handle, because I warn people all the time about trends. Relevance. You can define relevance in many different ways, but think carefully, beware of trends. And perhaps you don't have your best month then if you're not carrying the hottest, most expensive artist, but tradition is tried and true, and it will carry you through. So you never apologize for quality or rarity or being traditional.
And you don't need to sell 1 million units of a Duncan Fife settee. You just need to have...
if I wanted to.
Right. So you can, you just need, 100 people who can appreciate that. I want to get back to sort of William Instagram, this idea that, you know, people are so controlled by the kind of flashing images that they see. And to a certain degree, to appreciate antiques and vintage pieces, you need to devote a little bit more energy and time and attention span to it. So how do you combat this sort of short attention span that this new generation and even some of us older folks are developing, because we're so used to just spending 3 seconds and we don't sort of dive into the sort of study that's required to really appreciate some of these pieces. I also would say we're a country that doesn't really understand our own history. I don't want to get too political, but we really don't understand our history. So how can we expect people to appreciate sort of the material culture that came out of that history?
Well, our Instagram program is very content rich in terms of not just delighting people visually, but teaching something. And we get a lot of comments back about that. It's something that we think very carefully about. And the people who do that at work, who are a lot younger than I am, think very carefully about the best way to grab attention. Because sometimes traditional works of art, even our contemporary is a bit more traditional, that's not always the most attention-grabbing work. So we do work harder at it. And I am often looking for that very sort of sexy detail on a table or something a little bit flashier to first grab the attention to then be able to teach someone. And if they're open to being taught, well, then we're in business. I mean, I don't need someone to buy something. I want them to learn to love something, or perhaps learn to dislike something, but have an opinion. It's when you can get someone to have an opinion about something that you're successful.
William and Elizabeth, I mean, I suppose you sort of have a self-selecting audience, the people who come to you, but you probably have to do sales pitches to explain why they should go for this piece versus that piece. So talk about your strategies.
Right. There's a lot of research that goes into it, and I have a lot of fun with it with Instagram, where, posts you can do and you really research it and find photos of the same object and its different lives. But I think Instagram and platforms like that are really useful because it might not convert someone, but for people like us and everybody in this room that has an obvious interest in antiques and design, you're learning as you go through it. You're finding obscure house museums and places you never thought they would exist. So I think it's really helpful, and I think it is educational. It's sort of what you want to make it is what it can be. So it's just how you use it.
Well, much to the horror, I think, of Grace, who was in our office. I haven't posted on Instagram since wishing everyone a Merry Christmas. So I don't really use it anymore, and I know we should. I know that. But I love teaching and I love selling. I love doing both things. I really, truly prefer to do it on a more personal level. I don't know why suddenly Instagram just makes me feel kind of yucky, to be honest, and it feels totally... To me personally, I've just had this shift. I don't feel great about it. And I also don't necessarily want to tell everyone who my new favorite artist is. I don't want to do that. I want to keep him to myself, and I want to keep him to my clients. I really do. I've had clients who say you cannot post anything on Instagram. And to me, it also feels a little bit, right now, I don't like being in someone's house showing something before it's finished, and I know that's completely counterintuitive, and we've had a lot more followers if I did that, and I'm sure we would be more popular with some magazines, but it's what feels right. I think decorating is very intimate. I think buying paintings, furniture, is just a very intimate process in your relationship with your clients. And I like to keep my knowledge close to my chest, to be honest.
Yeah, and that's great. My question really isn't just how you use Instagram, but how do you convince your clients even to sort of invest in an antique? Or I talked to a designer we published last year. She had a client in Miami who said, I only want new things. I don't want anything vintage. I don't want anything old. He was a young NBA player. And she said I would sneak these vintage things into his house, and he always loved them, but he had this idea that he didn't want old things in his house. It's sort of, a bias that isn't really grounded in anything other than sort of what the culture is telling him. So I just, how do you sneak things in? How do you convince people that putting a really traditional thing there is going to, really enrich their lives more than something else?
Well, I think it's kind of like to Liz's point about quality and being able to take a client to an auction viewing or to a gallery and seeing it in person. Like just the other week, we went to a contemporary maker in Flatiron, but it was just the actual piece of furniture wasn't there, but just to be able to see the material, touch it, and be able to experience it in person. I think it's just like antiques. It's hard a flat image isn't really going to do it. Bringing things on approval, getting to see how they feel in the space, understanding patina. I think all of those things they can be intuitive and they can be intellectual. It's sort of both, and it's what you want out of it.
I think connection is the most successful aspect of what you're talking about. If you connect with something, and how can you connect with it? Maybe in person is the best way. But I think connection is what makes someone feel,
We found during the pandemic that we were selling a lot more antique and vintage pieces, and sort of slightly wacky ones or weird ones or things that were interesting. And our sort of users would tell us that they were looking for pieces because everybody was stuck in their homes. They wanted pieces that had stories to tell, that they could really engage with their history and their patina and their past owners. And I think that's actually was kind of a turning point, I think, for the vintage and antique world, was this pandemic, because nobody wanted, or people said, why do I really want to go to Restoration Hardware and buy sort of this couch that everybody else has? I want my home to, be personal. And I think that's the real appeal of antiques and Americana.
There's been a real shift, though, in my 25 years doing this that I think we have to address. And that is, when I first arrived in this world, we were doing period rooms for people with 10, 12, 15 pieces of furniture, all of the same period and style, all with, correspondent fabric and passementerie. That largely doesn't exist anymore, and I think you all would feel the same way. But it doesn't mean people are not buying the antiques. They're just buying them differently and using them differently. And I think that's something that I wanted to make sure that we address today, because again, it's not a dirty letter. It's just got to evolve with the times. And working with people like you all, we work together differently now, but we still work together.
Well, and I have to say, I think places like First Dibs have had so much to do with the democratization of antiques. I think that the market has absolutely changed, but there's essentially a much broader first step to this ladder of collecting right now, and it's Cherish and First Dibs, and that isn't great necessarily for the material in the middle, but museums have a role in this too. The vast majority of museums in America were literally founded to educate American taste. Taste for designers, taste for consumers, taste for manufacturers, whether it's RISD or the Met or the Cooper Hewitt. And Boscobel is part of that tradition. We have people who come to Boscobel, maybe they came because they wanted to visit West Point across the river or wanted to hike the trails near us, but they walk through our interiors and they call back later to ask, what was that green of that dining room? Or could you tell me how that Campeche chair is upholstered? And this is a dialogue we want to be in, because there are these moments where you find that connection. And whether you're learning about American history through these objects or whether you're making your own, antiques can absolutely play those parts. And it's something that you cannot replicate through the digital world or through reproduction. There's an authenticity factor that is knowable by everyone. It's the most intimate thing. You could know nothing about Americana, but you know if something is old. It has a sense about it, and we all respond to that in a way. So, I don't always just accept that the world has moved on and people aren't interested in antiques. They have this appeal, they have this magnetism to them. It's an aura, and it's a magic.
But talk about how Boscobel is thinking of when people come to your house. You're telling the story you're telling the story in a different way. And I think everybody here is probably a fan of house museums. I just went to Monticello for the first time since 1978 or something. And, the story that's being told there is entirely different from the story I was told in the 70s. And, it's more enriching for it, but it's also changed your sort of aesthetic approach to these houses. So you can't just sort of walk into a room and appreciate all the beauty there. You have to sort of understand the social context. So how are you adapting to the new audience that demands that sort of context?
I would say at Boscobel, one of the things is we're using the design language and the aesthetics to help bring out that social context. So for instance, one of the lovely things in our collection is a dumbwaiter. It's a fabulous round cabinet with the timbre sides, and inside is a turntable with shelves. And it's pretty rare. It's in New York's furniture tradition. There are a few examples in the South. But what does this object tell us? No one would have this today, a large drum on a tripod stand. But what it tells us is the owner of this object is used to entertaining in a way that the labor system post-slavery in New York didn't support. So you had to invent an object where you could still serve tea and clear up from your tea party, and you didn't have the same level of service, probably in slave labor, that you had before. Now, we could look at this cabinet and talk about it. It's a beautiful cabinet, gorgeous fluting. It's an important example of cabinet making. It's after the Thomas Sheridan pattern books, but it also tells you there's a homeowner grappling with this idea that life was one way and it's shifting into something else. And how does furniture help articulate that transformation of economy and just domestic relational, exchange? And it's all baked into that one object. And if you want to look for that layer, it's there. Even things like locks, on knife, fabulous knife boxes, right? A lovely knife box sits on a sideboard. I hope all of you have them, and if you don't, you should. Why have a lock on that object? If you wanted to steal the knives inside, you could just, the flatware inside, you could just pick it up and carry it away. That lock tells you something. It tells you that there's there are different levels of access and trust in that one household. That object can tell you more than any lecture could, or reading about those tensions in a household. It's a thrilling thing. If you want to walk past it, you can. It's also a beautiful thing. But those layers are there, and we're calling out those stories in ways that maybe we didn't before. So yes, you heard it here first. Knife boxes, hot object.
I was thinking as a parent, I was like, oh, the lock was so to keep the knives away from the children, which probably didn't even come into there. The children probably weren't even in the kitchen. But I was like, safety first. So you can put your own imagination on something from the 18th or 19th century, which I don't think you can do so much with things that are made today.
That whole idea of layers, one of the most fun things is getting to go to the upholsterer when you've bought an antique piece and you start picking things back, and I'll have an upholsterer email me and send me photos. There's some great printed linen that was tucked underneath, and it's just fantastic to get to see like how someone in 1910 reupholstered this Empire chair, and then there's the second layer after that from the 40s, and I just love that.
But it's also, upholstery. The easiest way to make an old piece of furniture feel contemporary and cool, right? It's very, very simple. I think people are scared of antiques because they think they can't maintain them, or that they're, if they're a little bit shabby, they can't fix them. Antiques have been around for a long time for a reason. They're well made and beautifully made and crafted.
And comfortable. They can be very comfortable. I always say a pair of Louis XV open armchairs, every house should have them. They're big, comfortable, and very elegant. Yeah.
I agree. we live all over our neoclassical furniture at home, and it's to be enjoyed. It's 200 plus years old, and it's still standing. And my parents raised me in a house full of neoclassical furniture. I've raised my kids in a house full of neoclassical furniture. It's good quality, again, so it stands. It's usable. I want to go back to something you said about changing fabrics. So one thing that I think people feel makes antiques undesirable sometimes are the quote unquote old lady fabrics that they have to live with, or the delicate fabrics and trims and whatnot. And, you know, there was a trend maybe 10, 15 years ago, it started, at least in my eyes, where you'd put something very, very contemporary on an older piece of furniture, and all of a sudden, you had a new piece of furniture. And I remember going to Doyle to a preview, and there was this gorgeous set of incredible French Empire chairs and actually 2 settees, and they had been covered in animal print. And I thought, okay, someone respected the antiques enough to want to live with them, but they couldn't live with them as antiques. They wanted to live with them as contemporary furniture, and they had put animal print, and it, you know, it was quite fabulous. Or you could do that with gray flannel, right? Just make it very calm and contemporary, but really respect the antique frame.
And the Elsie de Wolfs, you know, have been doing this for 100 years. And that's what's so great too, is, you know, these objects, yes, they're made at the workshop, and then they have this long, exciting life. And yes, sometimes they get to a museum pedestal, but those hundreds of years in between, when they're in and out of fashion, is such a thrill. We have this fabulous set of Curel chairs. They're intersecting circles as legs, and then the back is a half circle, OG circle. They're really fabulous. There's a similar set at the Met attributed to Duncan Phyfe. And what I love about our set is there are repairs, and the repairs are labeled 1924. And what does that tell you? Those fabulous neoclassical chairs, they were just as fashionable in the 1920s in order to be taken to be repaired as they were in the 18 teens when they were made. So, you know, they have these sort of intersecting geometries that are thrilling. And you find that again and again. It's like, who can look at Biedermeier furniture and not think, oh, that's just so amazingly, deliciously modern looking? And it still is, and it will be again and again and again.
There was a lot of reproduction furniture made of Duncan Phyfe furniture. And we will very often get phone calls saying, oh, I have a Duncan Phyfe dining table. It has a huge label. It has 15 chairs. We broke the 16th. But they turn out to be from the 30s, from the 40s, from the 50s. They're not Duncan Phyfe, they're Duncan Phyfe. Right.
I was just at Edgewater, Dick Jenrett's house, and you have to remind me, who was the maker in the 1890s that was reproducing?
Ernest Hagen. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
And they're equally as, well, they're prized amongst a different, maybe different circle, but they're just as intellectually interesting that 80 years later, 70 years later, we have these sort of, you know, exact replicas being made, sort of different forms, but it just really interesting that was the cycle of it. It was that fast already.
And he loved it. I mean, Ernest Hagen was really Duncan Phyfe's first biographer, and not that we want to derail this conversation, but it shows that there's always this dialogue between makers. And so often our first biographers of a great cabinet maker in America, it's based on a cabinet maker who came 2 generations later, who had to repair it, who had to recreate it, who encountered it and made notes and made sketches. And that's really what we historians rely on. Same thing with Townsend and Goddard. It was the cabinet maker who, you know, took notes and paid attention. Those people are in dialogue, and I find that so thrilling that my favorite visitors are, you know, the guys with sawdust on their shirts who come and want to see, and it's a living tradition.
I love the way you described the pair of chairs. Maybe the other panelists can talk about, evoke for us super sexy antiques that just you marvel at, that you've had the pleasure of either buying, purchasing, living with.
Figural furniture made in New York in the sort of 18 teens. There's a pair of Lion Monopodia tables that will come up on the screen. I put them up because they are one of my favorite objects we've had the privilege to handle. Oh, and that's an extraordinary Boston work table. You know, speaking about keeping something relevant, nobody needs a sewing table today. And this is not a sewing table in terms of a sewing machine, but a sewing table from, you know, the 18 teens as well. So what are you going to use that for today? You're not going to use it as a sewing table. You're not going to move it around the house, you know, depending on the season, do you need it by the fire? Do you need it in your bedroom? Do you need it on the porch? But it's, still highly, highly sought after as a table for a living room, or as part of a seating area for conversation in the end of a living room. Just incredible. And my great love is knowing where the inspiration came from. English Regency furniture, French Empire furniture, and knowing the source books that Longueuil and Fife were looking at. But for me, this is heaven.
It's really looking at these pieces as sculptures, art, as fine art, and you may not actually be able to or want to use them anymore, but put them in a corner of a room,
You could put them in a loft. They'd look great.
Yeah.
And you might think, that, it's formal, it's stodgy, it's a straitjacket. They're monsters. They're literally monsters you're bringing into your interior with you. They're surreal. They're bonkers, and they're so fabulous.
They're conversation pieces. And that's how we work with a lot of designers today. They'll come in and say, this is the room that I've designed. I need something for someone to come in and talk about. And that's where you find that one extraordinary focal point, whether it's to be hung on the wall, or it's to be put in the corner, or to be put in the center of the main wall of a room. That's how we're using antiques differently.
So I think we're nearing the end of time. I want to leave a little bit of time for questions. So if anyone has them or has not had one, now's the time to start to formulate one. But I want to sort of throw this out to all of you. I didn't prep you on this question, so this is going to be off the top of your head. But you've all sort of worked in the realm of history. History every day. So if you were to sort of talk about what the one lesson that you've learned from sort of looking at these things of the past, that you apply to your daily life, or that you think will propel you forward, like what would that be, if you can sort of talk about one lesson?
Quality is king. That's it. I've said it several times during today. I think if that's what I stick by, I'll be okay.
That's a good one.
I think for me, it's like it has to make you smile or laugh or have a sense of humor. Like, I live in a small apartment, but it's, so everything in it I have to love, and it has to make me happy. So for me, it's like, it's great if it's quality, but sometimes it's not.
And it could be quality to you.
Exactly. And that's a good point.
But I also think if we think so reverentially about antiques, or we think they're so serious, but there's, they're playful, they're bonkers, to quote you, they can be, and, that's also something to remember.
I'll quote Barry Tracy, who said, "A great restoration is never finished." So that's good job security for me.
Well, counter to that, I agree with Liz. Quality is king, 100%. And I would say the founder of our firm, what she always told people, if you do it right the first time, you never have to do it again. So take your time, study, make sure you have the right person helping you, who takes you seriously, and you won't have to do it again. And I think that's maybe an unpopular thought now, but I think clients who come to McMillan, we're expensive, so you don't want to do it again. But we'll guarantee that you don't have to do it again unless you want to. So we create plans that you can pull things in and out, but we're very deliberate, we're very careful, and we take our clients and their pocketbooks very seriously.
I'll just say that entry point for antiques, so often it really is knowing more about it, right? You hear like the fact that William can gush. I love William's gush as a fellow gusher myself. The more you know about these objects, the more you can invite people to enjoy them too. He's so great at that. You all have that ability, and we need more of you to be the missionaries also. The more we know about them, the more everyone can find one aspect that they respond to and connect to.
That's such a great note to end on. Thank you so much. But I want to turn it to all of you. If anybody has anything you want to ask these people, this is a great chance.
Yeah, I had a question for Hirschl and Adler. You've stressed how important quality is, so I'm sure you're always looking for exceptional things. But how do trends play into your acquisition strategy for inventory, like with your own sales trends or interior design trends?
Well, we always try to show the best example of the type of work that we're showing. And obviously, when you're a gallery that shows Bill Traylor, but also shows Duncan Fife, you have to use the scale of comparison that fits that particular area. So we always like to look back at the old adage, good, better, best. And, you know, something that is the best of its kind is the quality we're looking for. But that quality may be different if it's in one area or another. We also do want to appeal to a very wide range of clients. And so we will go look for things that may not fit into exactly what we always do. But if someone trusts our taste, we can help them find something that may be more what they're looking for, or in a price range they're looking for, that is the best for that price range. And there's nothing wrong with that, because you can always trade up when your ability changes, or perhaps when your taste changes. So we try to be flexible within our own parameters. And, you know, hopefully we end up with happy clients. But we do love when works come back to us. If their tastes have changed, we love to resell something for someone, always. And with a history of 70-some years, you can do that. We look back and we look forward.
We don't have an inventory, but I'll often say to clients, you can buy this painting, but when you sell it, I get the right of first refusal, because I care about everything that we sell, and I want to try and have a connection to it. I was thinking about asking someone for some andirons back. I mean, to buy them back. But I didn't love them when I sold them, and now they're by Donald Deskey, who designed Radio City. I know, but they're not with us anymore.
That's what I always think too. It's like we get to be, we're like helping these fantastic things find the right home, and that's the most rewarding part. It's like you get to find these fantastic things and send them off to where they're meant to live, or at least for now.
We're custodians.
Yeah.
For a moment. And our philosophy is always, and you'll agree with this, Jennifer, you want to send things out into the world with as much provenance as possible, as much information as possible. And for better or for worse, very often if you ask someone at Hirschl and Adler for an information sheet, you might get a very hefty homework assignment of reading 12, 15 pages on something. But I feel as a custodian of something for a time, you want to put it back out there in the world with its history intact, so that someone just adds on to that history.
It really is steering things into safe harbor. And what I love, of course, and I envy all of you, is you get to keep it circulating. You know, when I get something, then it's in captivity, presumably, you know, for forever. But it is so exciting to encourage, you know, collectors to, you get to own this, you get to add your name to that list, you get to be part of this object's history, just like it's part of yours. You know, it's always exciting when a table like the Levy table comes up and fresh to market. Nobody's seen it. It's astonishing. We have an opportunity, being the Hudson Valley's Design Museum, that we are in dialogue with this incredible maker community in the Hudson Valley. There are so many furniture makers up and down the Hudson Valley. And this chair on the right was made by Michael Robbins, who has a studio in the Hudson Valley and also designs for West Elm, so that he can come and comment on a fabulous Fife chair that's looking at ancient Egypt and ancient Rome and ancient Greece, is really invigorating for me. And it's a way of getting into the present that I think is right for us, because frankly, it's so easy to say, well, we brought in contemporary art, or we invited the local sculptor to do something on the lawn, which I think is quite common now. In fact, it's a cliche at this point. But to make a concerted effort to show that the strengths of Boscobel, these are living craft traditions, that's thrilling to me, that's exciting to me. And it's a relevance that's already there that I'm not manufacturing or forcing on anybody. So that's really what we're looking to do going forward. And, you know, and so this was part of an exhibition in 2016 that was our first of these experiments. And we'd like to do that a little bit, you know, more thoughtfully and more fully embrace that opportunity to combine contemporary craft and period craft going forward. It's our superpower, and we have this, and it's, you know, that's the silver lining of this enormous change, is I could never do anything better than Barry Tracy designed these interiors in the 1970s, but I can do this thing that he didn't have, he couldn't have done. So that's exciting.
All right. Well, I wish we could continue all day. I love, this is a privilege, and probably some of you do too, but we're being kicked out of the room, I think. So thank you for joining us. Thank you.